Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the changes to ACC in your practice for Medtech Evolution. It's a very busy time for everyone at the moment, so we appreciate you taking the time to watch the webinar. If for some reason you can't stay for the whole session, we will be putting a recorded copy of the webinar by the end of the week onto our Insight customer portal. So to kick things off, we'll just go over the agenda for today. So before we get started, I'll cover everything we're going to go through. We will start with a few pointers on how to use GoToWebinar properly, and then we will go through the presentation itself, and at the end we'll have a Q&A session. So if you've got any questions about the audio or visual connection on GoToWebinar, we'll try and answer those immediately, but any questions related to the topic of the webinar today we'll answer at the end. So you should be able to see the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of your screen there. You click the orange arrow to collapse the control panel. The orange microphone tells you that you're muted, and all audience members will be muted for this session. The next icon will either maximize or minimize the screen that you're viewing the webinar in. We recommend that you keep it maximized. And if you have a question, type it in the main box where it says enter a question for staff, and we'll answer it at the end of the session. If it's not answered directly today, then we will follow up with you in the next couple of days. So to kick things off, I'm Holly Hodgson. I'm the Clinical Product Specialist here at Medtech, and I'll lead the main component of the presentation today. At the end of the presentation, Prashant Koval, our Product Specialist, and Chrissy Patterson, our Product Manager, will lead the Q&A session. Right, so you can all see my Evolution open there. So the changes to the ACC components in Evolution means that you can directly submit ACC45s, 18s and invoices directly to ACC now. These changes affect multiple modules and impacts both clinical and administrative financial roles within the practice, so it's really important that all your staff are aware of what has changed, how it impacts their workflow and their roles, and where they can find additional resources if they need to familiarise themselves a little bit more. I will also show you where you can access those resources later on in the presentation. So firstly, we'll cover setting up the ACC vendor ID. So this is mandatory in order to send 45s, 18s and invoices directly to ACC. If we just go to the staff setup now, in here, and if you move to the provider tab, this is the section we're talking about here. So when you upgrade, all ACC provider numbers are copied and pasted into the ACC vendor ID field. If you create a new provider after upgrading, then you need to manually copy the ACC provider number and put it into the ACC vendor ID field. You'll also see in the location settings, if we open the location settings here, under the codes and defaults tab, there's an ACC vendor ID field here as well. This is only applicable for practices that have previously enabled and used the ACC e-schedule. If this is your practice, then you need to be aware that the script won't automatically copy the ACC provider numbers into the vendor ID fields, so you need to do that manually. And it's really important if your practice in your location settings, if the ACC vendor ID field is blank, you must leave it blank. To allow the practice to send forms and invoices to ACC through their online interface, you need to have a digital certificate configured either in the location or the staff setup. So both the digital certificate and passphrase are provided by HealthLink. If your practice has a single digital certificate for a specific location, this needs to be set up here in the location settings, and you can see the orange digital certificate icon just there. Similarly, if an individual provider has been assigned a digital certificate, then that needs to be set up in their staff setup. So we'll just go back to that there. Under that same provider tab, and you can see here the orange digital certificate icon. So I'll now go over setting up ACC contracts and services. So just to provide a little overview, there are two types of ACC contracts. One is a regulatory generic contract, and the second is a non-regulatory contract or healthwise contract. So these are also found in the staff setup, and we go to the same provider tab here, and you can see here a field called ACC provider code. So regulatory contracts are the generic prices that ACC will pay for services. Each regulatory contract has a contract number based on the staff role. So for example, in the screen here, you'll see it says General Practitioner 80. So it means for a General Practitioner, the contract number is 80. And it's 56 for a nurse, 56A for a nurse practitioner, and so on. The regulatory contract numbers are based on this code, and if you need to change it or add it, you click on the ellipsis, and that will bring up a full list of all the different roles they have and their associated codes next to it. So you need to make sure that the ACC provider code is the right code for that staff member based on their provider type. And that's really important. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. Non-regulatory contracts are legal contracts between ACC and an organisation which provides ACC services at a defined rate. So non-regulatory contracts are set up by clicking on this icon here. And here you can enter the contract number, next to the services. If your practice has a non-regulatory contract number for the location, then you need to make sure you enter that in the location setup, which is back in location settings and under that codes and defaults tab, just there. You need to be aware that if a service code doesn't exist in your PMS, it needs to be set up first with its subsidy rate prior to entering the contract number beside the service. For detailed instructions on how you can do that, you can access our user guides on our Insight Customer portal, and I'll show you links to that later in the presentation. So I'll now talk to you a little bit about the automated ACC contract account. So if we go back into the staff member setup, as part of this upgrade, a new ACC account will be created automatically for each ACC vendor ID entered into the PMS. So because the staff member will have their own ACC vendor ID, the ACC account will be created for that specific staff member's vendor ID, and it's automatically added under their staff setup in the accounts tab here. These accounts will be grayed out automatically to avoid them being removed. For practices that are enabled for ACC eSchedule, the ACC account will be created for the ACC vendor ID in the location setup, and the account will be associated with all staff members linked to that account. We'll now just talk a little bit about the billing for quantity-based service. So ACC invoices require the submission of a billing method for all services that you are invoicing for, and they've got three billing methods, which are distance, units, which are a flat fee, and time. So currently, services in the PMS can be set up as quantity-based, but the billing method can't be defined. So to enable this, we've got a new drop-down section. If we go into the service here, and I'll open up one of the services, and you'll see here the quantity-based service tick box. If I select that, then you can choose units, distance, or time here. As part of the upgrade, existing services that are configured as quantity-based services will have the default selection for the billing method set. So we'll now move out of the setup screen and go through an ACC45. So I'll open a new ACC45 for this patient. So the existing ACC45 form has been updated to include the new functionality. In this main tab here, you can add up to 10 diagnoses, which was previously 3. The time of accident here is now not mandatory anymore, it's optional. Under the Work and Referral tab, the employment name and details are only required if the patient is an employee. So for all other types of employment, it's optional. And if we click here, the employment type of shareholder has now been renamed to company owner or part owner. ACC have requested that the employer's country and postcode are included, but it's not yet mandatory, but if you can, add that in. In the work capacity section here, there are extra tick boxes where you can specify how long the patient's unfit for work for. You don't need to complete this if the employment type is company or part owner. You can give a maximum of 14 days off work or on alternative duties in this form here. You can also go into further details about physical restrictions if they are not able to do, if they're able to do selected, then you can choose what restrictions are to those alternative duties. And down here, the referral information section is unchanged, that's as it was before. So as well as sending the ACC45 form with the details that you enter in here, there are also other parts of the patient demographics that are sent as well. So on Insight in the documentation that we have, it explains what fields from the F3 patient register screen are also needed to send these forms, and it tells you whether or not it's mandatory. If you don't include any of that information and you try to submit the form, it will give you an error message telling you what you need to enter, and one that is commonly coming up for practices is the lack of a postcode in the patient's F3 screen, especially if they've got a separate billing address. You need to make sure they have a postcode. So the ACC45 form is now a one-time submission, so you need to get it accurate before you tick send electronically. Okay. If it's rejected or parked or yet to be submitted, you can edit it. But as soon as it's submitted and the status is receipted, you can't edit that form. If you need to change a diagnosis after you submit the 45, you can complete an ACC18, or if you want to, you can complete a change of diagnosis form. We'll just go over the electronic lodgement utility. So this is found under, not under utilities, sorry, claims and electronic e-schedule. So I've added that to my quick access toolbar. So there are a few differences, more that buttons have been removed that aren't required anymore, but this is where you can select the claims that you're wanting to, you can select all, or you can select specific claims that you're wanting to process. Every ACC45 form that is submitted receives a response message which indicates whether it's been received or not, and the statuses, which will then display in the status screen. So to view that information, we will go to the claim status screen. So if we go under the accident ribbon menu here, and there's an icon saying claim status, and I've also put that on my quick access toolbar there. So it tells you the status of those claims there. I'll just cover going through an ACC18 form now. So back onto that patient ribbon menu, under the accidents heading, you can see ACC18, and I've also added that to the quick access toolbar. So in the screen here, you just need to select the ACC45 number that this is regarding. Then auto-populates all that information relating to that injury below. If you need more diagnosis codes, you can add that using the Add button down here. You can also delete diagnosis if you want to, or you can select which one's the primary diagnosis, which should be for the most relevant diagnosis code. Just like the ACC45 form, you can also add up to 10 diagnoses here. And if we move to the Ability to Work tab here, this allows you to enter the unfit for work and initial and subsequent restrictions. You can only enter subsequent restrictions after you've entered the initial time restrictions, and where possible, you need to provide further details in the comments field. You can enter up to 3 time periods on one medical certificate, but you can't have any overlaps of the dates at all. So if you haven't completed that correctly and you try to submit it, you'll get a warning message and it'll tell you what needs to be changed in order to submit that form. Under the Assistance Required tab here, this is where you specify what assistance the patient requires in order to get back to work. If you choose yes here, then you can go through and select one of the options below, and the rest of the tab is optional. Patient Provider Declaration tab, so the provider needs to select the checkbox here after they've discussed it with the patient and they have authorization, and the date will automatically populate to today's date. Just like the ACC45, certain patient demographics are required to submit this form as well, so make sure that you familiarise yourself with the release notes so you know what information is mandatory in order to submit these forms. And similarly with the ACC45, if you're missing any of that information and you try to submit the form, you will get a warning prompt that tells you quite clearly what you're missing. As soon as you click OK on this form, it's submitted. So if you want to change a diagnosis after that form is submitted, you need to use a new ACC18 form or a change of diagnosis form. If the form is rejected, the reasons for that will display in that claims status screen that we showed you before, but it will also immediately pop up on the provider's screen. So I'll now go through the change of diagnosis form. So again, if we go back to the patient ribbon menu under accidents, you'll see at the bottom change of diagnosis, and you can also add that to your quick access toolbar. Just like the other form here, we just select what the ACC number is that we're relating this to. And just to highlight here, the change of diagnosis number and also on the ACC18 form, that box will stay grayed out until this form is submitted, and that number is automatically generated by ACC. So don't worry that the box doesn't have a number in and you can't enter a number. That's automatically generated by ACC. So again here you can add diagnoses by clicking the add button, you can delete them, you can change them by highlighting them, and you can select which one's the primary diagnosis. So you'll notice here that the change of diagnosis form doesn't allow you to specify work capabilities or restrictions, so you need to use an ACC18 form for those. And here under the patient provider declaration, again, you have to tick that checkbox after the patient's given authorization, and the date will automatically populate to today's date. So we'll just talk a little bit about invoicing for ACC services now. So prior to these changes, the ACC contract number that's in the staff setup wasn't looked at. So there wasn't much emphasis on income provider when you do an invoice for a patient. So if I bring up a new invoice, what we're talking about here is the provider in the income screens here. These changes now means that ACC checks that the income provider and their associated contract number matches the service that you're invoicing for. So an example of this and a common issue for practices at the moment is if my income provider is set to a GP and I try and invoice for a nurse-related service, ACC will reject that claim. This is why it's really crucial that you verify your staff member setup, and we'll go into that staff member setup again. Under the provider tab, you need to check that the provider code is correct for that staff member's role. And then in the accounts tab, income tab, you need to make sure that the income is not pointing to a nominated provider that's of a different provider type, because ACC will reject that claim. We will answer any questions that you have about that towards the end. So if we go back into that invoice screen here, if you need to add a purchase order number, you can annotate the invoice itself by clicking that middle button on your invoice screen and put your purchase number in that screen. Purchase order number, sorry. We'll just talk a little bit about the grouping of claims. So when you're viewing claim files, you need to decide if you're wanting to view it by practice or by an individual provider. So that's specified in the location settings here. We open that up under the Codes and Defaults tab, and you can see here, is it practice grouping or provider grouping? If you're wanting to do practice grouping, you need location level vendor ID, and that you might not already have that in your practice. And if that's the case, then you need to talk to ACC prior to changing that format. If you want to check the status of a claim, I'll just go through that screen again. So under the patient ribbon menu, the accounts menu, there's a claim status screen. Here this lists all the claims. You can see those statuses, whether they're failed, receipted, completed or not. If you double click on that, it brings up the claim itself. And if you wanted to search for all the claims under a provider, then just like you normally do, you search for the account number in the F2 screen, and then you can open up the account holder account screen to show all the corresponding claims made under that provider. You can view those claims by double clicking, and that then gives you further details. Here you can unfinalize claims and you can transfer the patient or account, and it tells you the vendor ID and the contract number, as well as the service and the income providers there. So that concludes the overview in the PMS. We'll come back to it in the Q&A session. I'll just show you here our Insight Customer Portal has got, that's www.insightmedtechglobal.com. If you click on the Downloads New Zealand button, you'll see here Medtech Evolution ACC API integration. And if you click on that screen, you'll then get a list of all the available either webinars or resources and reading material for these changes to the ACC modules in the PMS. So that is where all resources will be put relating to this. So we recommend, especially the different roles in the practices, you familiarise yourself with whatever is incorporated in your workflow and what's going to be changing for you. So Chrissy and Prashant, can you hear me all right, guys?
Yep.
And yes, so Prashant, I'll just give you control and I'll go back into Evolution and we can kick off the Q&A session.
Okay, it's going to be a very quick Q&A session. We've only got a few questions. So it's all good. The first question that we have here is, what if my Medtech does not have the ACC change of diagnosis screen available? Prashant, do you just want to show in the access control where you enable that?
Yep. So this is where you'll have like, so if you go into, for this particular person, like already it's there under certificates, like currently ACC18 is not enabled, so you can get ACC18 ticked and you can move there. Similarly, like the change of diagnosis will be under the same certificates under patient. So like, it'll be already, for this particular profile, it's already available. So like if I go in here, certificates, like
Under accidents, Prashant.
Is it under
certificates, accidents on the other side, selected.
All right, yep. Change of diagnosis, yep. So it's already there for that like profile.
Yeah, so for all the roles within your practice that need to access these new forms, the ACC18, the claim status screen, the change of diagnosis, you'll need to ensure that their relevant roles have access to the specific functions that you need to have available in there. So the next question here is, are these the same changes from October 2019 or something new? Yes, so these changes were released for Evolution as part of the version 1.26 upgrade, which came out in October 2019. The reason that we are providing this webinar now is because we have quite a few queries on our support desk related to these functions in the software. So we wanted to provide a webinar for the users to be able to see those changes being demonstrated. Next question here is around toolbar icons. Will we be able to ever move the icons like we could in Medtech 32? I want to put the new ACC18 icon next to the 45 icon that is in the middle of my toolbar. Yes, we do have an enhancement coming shortly in one of our releases so that we can allow you to move those items on your quick access toolbar and reorder them accordingly. So that will be available shortly. Next question, how do I tell the difference between the ACC45 old button and the new button in the roles?
So we don't have a, like we've just changed the whole ACC existing screen, and we have like added this thing like the whole ACC45 screen has changed. So there is no new and old icon. It's like the same thing for ACC45.
Okay, that's fine. So one other thing I'll mention there around the functions in the software. A lot of practices currently use the ACC18 form that BPAC provides, and they may see two different ACC18 options on the toolbar. And so you do have a choice around whether you want to use the BPAC ACC18 form, which is, Prashant is just hovering over there now. You can see it's got the little blue ACC18 icon, or you can use the one that's sitting under the accidents menu, which is the Medtech Evolution ACC18 form. So it's up to you which one you want to be able to use within your practice. You don't have to disable the BPAC one and use the Evolution one. You can choose which one you want to be able to use. Next question here, on 1st of May, new ACC changes are coming through. So with the newest Evolution update, will the amounts automatically be coming on 1st of May? When we charge ACC. I know that there's a new update. We're a rural ACC practice. So we will be releasing a subsidy update. In fact, it's already available on the Insight customer portal for the rural GP changes. You can find that under the Evolution download section. So if you run that now, it will have an effective date of 1st of May, and then those changes will automatically be there when you go to invoice on the 1st of May for those rural ACC subsidies and services. Another question here, why is the ACC claim status under the patient ribbon and not under the claims ribbon?
I mean, just I mean, you put everything under that, like all the accident related stuff, like so that's the reason claim status is under here currently. So not on the claims ribbon. So like
yeah, so we just wanted to make sure everything related to accidents was all kept in the same place for the users, make it a bit easier to navigate around. So that's all of the questions that we currently have. I just wanted to reiterate again what Holly was mentioning earlier around the Insight customer portal. So we do have on Insight all of the changes relating to ACC documented there. There are webinars for each different part of the process that you would go through with ACC, including the setup, the configuration, your invoices, your claiming, all of that sort of stuff. We have quick start guides, one pages that you can provide your staff, as well as frequently asked questions and all of that sort of stuff around each different part of the process. So you'll find them all on Insight under the Downloads NZ section and under Evolution Training Guides and Manuals, as well as the Evolution Webinars section as well. So they're all there and all available to you as resources at any time that you require them.
Fabulous. So is that all of our questions, Chrissy?
That's all of the questions.
Great, thanks guys. So I'll end the webinar for everyone. Thank you very much for watching, and a copy of this webinar will be put on Insight by the end of the week as well, just in case you missed something. Okay, thank you Prashant, thank you Chrissy.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers, bye guys.